My brothers and sisters, our topic for today, for this Family Formation Sunday, are commandments 6 through 10. And as I'm sure you would agree, oftentimes the commandments are presented as a series of negatives. And in fact, let's face it, that's the way they're written. Do not do this. Do not do that. And so the Catholic moral life, how we are supposed to live, becomes a set of rules. It becomes a set of inhibitions, which, especially for young people, can be a bit grating. The church is just a bunch of no's. Don't do this, don't do that, don't watch this TV show, don't look at that website. Follow the straight and narrow. And it can be very distressing and discouraging and distorted because the Catholic moral life is fundamentally about love. Now, we say the word love, and everybody's got their own definition of love. People say, I love pizza. I love my wife. They're not the same kind of love, okay? There are different kinds of love. The Christian moral life must be about the Christian way of love, which is the way of union, the way of being with the other, the way of being present to them in good times and in bad. Not just your spouse, but your brother, your sister, to be present to them. Who is Jesus? God with us. What is the Christian called to do? To be with each other, to be with their brother, to be with their sister. And that's hard. But it's very, very hard. I know a number of folks, heck, I fall into this trap myself, who wish that the Catholic faith was just, you come to Mass on Sunday, you sit in your designated spot, woe to anyone who would take it, and then you leave. And the rest of the week, you be about your business. This is not the Christian way. The Christian way of life is about community, to be with the other, and that is hard. That is really, really hard. But that is the way that we are called. Why did Jesus send out his apostles 2 by 2? Because the Christian way is a way of life of community. Why do we speak of our parishes as places of community? Because that's what the church is, a community. God saves us in community. So commandments 6 through 10 are all about, I would offer, the grammar of community and preserving those relationships that are proper in this world in which we live. And they must be rightly ordered. The 6th commandment, of course, thou shalt not commit adultery. The 7th commandment, thou shalt not steal. The 8th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. The 9th and 10th, do not covet your neighbor's wife, do not covet your neighbor's goods. I'd like to offer you, brothers and sisters, that the 6th commandment deals with family, the community of family life. The 7th commandment deals with society, living out in the world. The 8th commandment deals with who we are, creatures who can speak and who know the truth. And the 9th and 10th deals with charity, seeing the other as one we are called to love and to foster their flourishing, their good, not to see them as an enemy to our good. The 6th commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery. You know, the church's teaching on human sexuality is oftentimes presented as kind of one of the paramount issues for the Catholic Church. And of course, this is a distortion to a degree. Recent years, the debates around Humanae Vitae and, the church's prohibition against contraception, which is so contrary to our society's norms. The church is very clear teaching about the reservation of human intimacy to marriage. That, again, is very countercultural. It rubs a lot of people wrong and gets their eyebrows, what are you talking about? The church is just out of step with the times here. Well, brothers and sisters, one of the reasons why this teaching is so fundamental to our understanding of human morality is because it's where human beings come from. No other human activity results in a child who exists forever. I don't care how tight your hand holding is, okay? Or how romantic your looking into your lover's eyes is. There is one action and one action alone, which results in a human being who exists forever. And because of that incredible, awesome dignity, the church recognizes that this is a place of profound sacrality. It's a sacred place that we must reverence and respect. As the church thinks about this primordial reality of man and woman, it's right there in the beginning of the Bible, Adam and Eve coming together as one. We see that this union results in two things. When a man and a woman come together as one, two things happen. Number one, the man and woman are bonded in a very particular bond. It's a bond that I think oftentimes the woman feels stronger than the man. It actually affects her psychologically and physiologically. There's a chemical bonding that takes place there. But it goes beyond this union, physical union. It also results, not always, but it is ordered to the procreation of life. Now again, we know this doesn't always happen. It's a great mystery why infertility seems to be such a widespread phenomenon. All kinds of people have different theories. But the fact is that it's a suffering when that happens, because we recognize it as the privation of a good, conception of a child. When a man and woman come together in the marital embrace, they are bonded together, their houses come together, and it results in new life. The church recognizes that this coming together, the marital act, has profound, again, sacredness because of what happens. Two human beings are bonded together and new life is created. And because of this, the church is very clear that for an act of intimacy to be moral, two things must happen. The two parties coming together must will a life together. They must be joined together. This action is a sign. It's a physical sign. You might even say it's a sacrament, a visible sign which effects an invisible reality. I choose you. You are mine. I want to raise a family with you. I want to make a house with you. Brothers and sisters, this desire for union with the other is foundational for the morality of the act. And if we reduce intimacy to pleasure, to letting off steam, we lose its profound dignity. Every single act of intimacy is a proclamation in the body, I want you for myself, and I want to give myself to you for the rest of my life. That is what that action means. But it also must be fundamentally open to new life. That is the natural meaning of the action. When a man and a woman come together, it results, not always, but is ordered to procreation. And so the church's teaching on human intimacy is also profoundly connected to an openness to new life. And if a couple is not prepared for children, perhaps they are not prepared for marriage, because marriage is ordered to new life. Now, again, sometimes it does not happen on the biological level, but still, that couple is still called to be open to the new life and to being mentors or to being present, to being somehow supportive of the culture of life which their very marriage represents. And this is why, brothers and sisters, this is why, because the human act of intimacy, like every other act of intimacy in the natural world, is ordered to children and to family life. And it's why every single action to be moral must be open to life. It doesn't have to result in new life, but it must be open to life. The church is very clear that artificial contraception is contrary to the will of God for the marital act. And we must be open to newness of life. There is, of course, situations where one perhaps is being called a space of birth. There are situations where a child right now, it just perhaps would not be prudent to receive that child. Perhaps a moment of profound poverty, psychological struggles. But the fact remains that the marital act must be fundamentally, at its base, open to new life. This is also one of the reasons why the church has a very challenging teaching on same-sex relationships. It's not that we don't want there to be friendship in people's lives, including very intense, intimate friendships between people of the same sex. The brotherhood that exists between men, the sisterhood that can exist between women, powerful, and necessary for full human flourishing. But human intimacy is connected to family life. And the only action that results in the conception of a new life is when a man and a woman come together and they are open to new life. Brothers and sisters, this whole reality of married life and human intimacy also touches upon, of course, one of the tremendous scourges of our day, horrors of our day. And that, of course, is pornography. Pornography is a multi-billion-dollar industry. A multi-billion-dollar industry. Because, first of all, the desire for human intimacy is very deep within us. It's a kind of a natural drive there. But there is also within us profound selfishness. We are sons and daughters of Adam. And because of that, we are inclined to selfishness. And the fact that you can view awful material that will literally change the way that you think, and the anonymity of a telephone, of a laptop, and there's sort of an underlying kind of acceptance of it, even though it's something that most people don't talk about. There's an acceptance of it. Again, it's multi-billion-dollar industry. Indicates how far we have gone. Brothers and sisters, I do not want to dwell on this. However, if you're getting uncomfortable, it's probably for a good thing, because it is a real problem. What's the number one offense that is confessed in that box? Well, in the top 3 is impurity. In the top 3. And yet, we don't hear enough of these sorts of struggles from the pulpit because it's difficult for us to talk about. But it's important, critically important. So I urge you, if this is something which you are struggling with, I urge you to bring it to the light of confession, to get rid of whatever program or whatever you need to get rid of, to fight against this scourge. Pornography is a profound offense against family life. It destroys families. It destroys ways of thinking about other human beings. And not only men, but also, horror of horrors, it's becoming rather common among women too. That is perverse. A woman who was made for self-gift to be a mother can fall into the same trap too. So, thou shalt not commit adultery goes far beyond not looking at, dirty pictures. It goes to our reality as communal persons. We are made for community, especially the community of family life, which is, in fact, ordered around human intimacy. It comes from this place, and it's ordered around it. Thou shalt not commit adultery. I urge you, especially parents, to strive to build within your homes a culture of love, of self-gift, openness to life, openness to your children. Number 7, thou shalt not steal. Brothers and sisters, this is pretty easy to recognize its wickedness. Ask any 6-year-old child whose 4-year-old brother or sister has taken their toy, and they will cry out, "That's mine." The sense of possession, the sense of what is mine, what belongs to me, is something which, again, is very primordial, very deep within us. And we have an experience of injustice when what is ours is taken from us. And yet, because we are sons and daughters of Adam, we reach out and we take what does not belong to us. Our society, our political society, by that I don't mean politics of Republican and Democrat, I just mean human beings living together in society. We rely upon a kind of a trust, a sacred trust among one another. We believe that people have rights. Because they have duties, they have rights. They have a right to provide for their family. They have a right to good, honest work. And for those who would interfere and take what is rightly someone else's, that's a grave offense against justice. We don't need even Christian faith to understand that. And there have been many political regimes who have attempted to build up a society based upon taking stuff from one group and giving it to another. And almost invariably, it ends up resulting in the degradation of human dignity and of great violence. Now, we are our brother's keeper. We must provide for one another, but we can't take what belongs to someone else and claim it for ourselves. What are some common offenses against stealing? Well, there's the small stuff like when we are, well, I say a small stuff, I beg your pardon, don't misunderstand me, but we think of a young child who, in a moment of weakness, surrounded by his fellow villains, takes some bubble gum from the corner store. But we also recognize someone who's 40, 45 years old and is pledged, is promised to work 40 hours a week. But they waste time. That's stealing. That's theft. You're stealing money from your employer. You owe your employer what you have promised them to do. And to waste time, to not do what you ought to do, that is a kind of stealing. It's a violation of the trust that has been established. We think about taxes. Taxes are due to the state. And no matter what you may feel about them, and believe me, I got some pretty strong feelings if you want to talk to me about them after our talk, it is a fact that we have an obligation to support our municipalities, our state, our country to the degree that we can. And taxes, by and large, are a moral thing. And so we have an obligation to pay what we ought to pay and not to lie about that, which is, again, a violation of a public trust. Perhaps we have stolen something long time ago, and it's been on our conscience, maybe whatever, part of an inheritance, or in a move we took something which really belonged to somebody else. We took a computer from work, whatever. Brothers and sisters, a big part of overcoming sins against the seventh commandment are making restitution. We have to make restitution when we can. If we have stolen something, it's very important to pay it back to the degree that we are able. That's very, very important. That can take time, and sometimes it demands anonymity, which is okay in certain circumstances. But it is important to pay back what we have taken. So, violations against the seventh commandment are violations against the public trust, society. And then there is the eighth commandment. Thou shalt not lie, bear false witness. It actually doesn't say thou shalt not lie, thou shalt not bear false witness, which is, of course, the same thing. When you are on the stand, you must speak the truth. You are under oath. Brothers and sisters, we as human beings are made for the truth. A dog cannot lie. At least I don't think so. I'm not a dog person, so I don't think so. A cat can't lie. Now they can do kind of, silly things when they feel guilty, which is basically they know you're going to punish them. But a human being can lie. We are speaking animals. And we can know the truth, and we cannot speak it or choose to speak a distortion of it, which is a violation of what and who we are. We are creatures made for the truth. The only creature in all of the natural realm, other than the angelic, made for the truth, to know the truth, and it will set us free and illuminate who and what we are, what kind of creatures we are. We can know the truth and we can speak it. To tell a lie is to violate our fundamental being, to violate who we are. There's a line from a very famous heavy metal band that I used to listen to and I may or may not still listen to, which said, when a man lies, he kills some part of himself. Now, I'm sure other very smarter people than this rock singer said that too, but there's something to that. When we lie, we destroy something within us, and we make it easier to lie the next time. When we can't trust someone because we don't know if they are telling the truth or not, we have begun to rip away at the fundamental foundation of human relationships. Human relationships. I trust what you are telling me to be true. And sometimes that truth is very, very hard. Very hard. And sometimes we don't need to tell someone the fullness of the truth because they're not ready for it or unable to receive it. Think, for example, of a parent. A parent wouldn't tell a small child, everything that's happening in one's relationship at work or with one's spouse. You just wouldn't. But we still can't lie. Brothers and sisters, I think for many of us, not for all, praise God, but for many of us, we have accepted some compromises. We know that there are situations in our life that we must speak the truth to. Perhaps there are people in our life that want us to gossip, Gosh, did you hear what happened this time or that? What do you think about this or that? And we know in our heart that we really shouldn't engage, but boy, oh boy, we don't want to appear different. We don't want to challenge our brother or our sister or our coworker. We don't want to confront them with the truth. And so we go along. Perhaps, another kind of piece of this is we reveal the faults of others when no one has the right to know or the need to know. This is also a kind of violation of the truth, because it's a violation of the truth of the person. We're mischaracterizing them. We're placing them in a kind of a box based upon a fault or a sin, which the person we're speaking to doesn't really have a right to know or a need to know. Gosh, do you know what Sally did down the road? Well, no, what? Blah, 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 We spread vile stuff all around and we destroy people's reputation. Maybe it's true, but they didn't need to know that, and you've suddenly created a portrait of this other person that's not true. Sins of the speech are all about violations of who we are. They get to kind of the heart of who we are. In Dante's Inferno, some of you may know this, the Inferno, which of course is the kind of a literary exploration of hell, at the center of hell, which of course is a icy lake, is not found those who have sinned in the sixth commandment, those who have fallen in impurity. It's not even those who have stolen stuff. It's traitors, Judas, Brutus, and then I think Cato maybe, I don't quite know, but it's some old Roman, okay? Who's a traitor, who says to his leader, I love you, I'll be with you forever, and then cuts him in the back, stabs him in the back. Someone who speaks one word but means something else, duplicitous, a sinner, someone whose word does not mean what it sounds like. It's the devil. The devil is the prince of lies, and it's a violation of who we are. All right, lots of fun stuff today, huh? Boy. 9th and 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet. As I said, I would like to encourage you to think of this as these are sins against charity, against community life, in the sense of we must be about the fostering and the flourishing of our brother or our sister. We must look for their good. To covet a neighbor's wife or spouse, husband, or goods, the sin of envy is very, very subtle and very tricky, and it gets deep within us. And the real offense here is not how we feel. It's not feelings, brothers and sisters. Because we can look at the Joneses across the street and have all kinds of feelings. I feel inadequate. Look what they can do. All their kids, emerge from upstairs dressed for mass, whatever it is. It's not the feeling of, even I would offer anger, why, God, haven't you given me this? Why does everybody else have something but I don't? It's rather how we treat our brothers and sisters. Do we treat them as sons and daughters of God or as enemies? Do we treat them as individuals who are not made for communion with ourselves, but they are made to manipulate? They are made to provide us pleasure or laughter or warm, fuzzy feelings inside. I think coveting, there's a connection there with using, yes, indeed, using other people, because we look to them sometimes for our own affirmation. We look to them to compare ourselves to. We use them as a kind of a standard by which we compare ourselves. And we don't encounter the other person as a human being made for love and for communion like ourselves. And just a couple of practical points about looking at each other and thinking, gosh, look at what they have and what I don't. Let me tell you from experience, from 14 years of hearing confessions, you do not know what people struggle with. Somebody can look like they've got it completely together, and yet there are very deep wounds that they struggle with. Deep wounds, deep sins from the past that they wrestle with. Everybody, I think everybody's got something in their life that is not deserving of coveting, but of compassion, of pity, of love. So my brothers and sisters, we are made for community. We are made for communion. Sins against marriage, sins against human intimacy, the sixth commandment, begin to attack this fundamental unit of the family. Sins against the seventh commandment, theft, violate the public trust that we must have with one another, the respect for property and for one's rights and one's duties. The sins against the eighth commandment, trust, violations against ourselves, what we are made to be, creatures who know the truth and who speak the truth and use the gift of language well. Eighth and ninth commandment, do we see our brother and our sister as, in fact, one to love, to embrace, to comfort? Or do we see them as, again, kind of an object on the play of our life, the scenery of our life? They're objects against which we compare our own life, or we want what they want, or wish that they didn't have what they have. Brothers and sisters, the whole Christian moral life is boiled down to love, which is communion, which is hard. Let us all strive to embrace this call to be men and women of communion. Let us strive to love as we ought to love as He loves, unto death, and by being present to one another. At this point, I'd like to invite Mr. Justin Kortuem, Director of Parish Formation, to come forward and to offer a couple of practical points. As he's coming forward, I just want to thank you all again for your commitment to the education of your children. It's a very difficult time, like it always has, but I think now has its own particular challenges. And I commend you and I pray for you. And if you ever want to come in and say, Father, what you said about contraception or about, speech is really challenging. Can you talk more about that? I've got some questions. I got some concerns. The door is always open. Please let me know.
What we want to get into here in this little section is how do we live out these commandments at home? And first of all, we have to realize a couple things. We have the commandments, as Father said, they're a list of restrictions. However, they're only a list of restrictions because we don't love properly. They're a set of restrictions because of original sin. They're a set of restrictions because of my own lack of virtue and my actual sin. If I lived a life of virtue and a life of perfect love, I don't need the commandments. I don't need the commandments in heaven. I don't need the commandments if I love perfectly. Jesus didn't need the commandments in the stricter sense of need. They were still there for the culture, but Jesus didn't need them because he didn't desire to break them. He never desired to break the commandments. So therefore, he didn't need the commandments. We need the commandments because we desire to break them often. And we don't have the life of virtue, the habitual goodness that is in us. And we have this life of original sin that we are not completely free from. So we have to realize that with original sin, a couple things happened. And one of those things is we had a dulled intellect. One of the other things is we have a weakened will. So for families and families trying to incorporate these commandments into their family life, we want to build up our intellect and strengthen our will. So we want to build up our intellect and strengthen our will in a number of ways. And the best way this happens is creating habits at your house that do these things for you almost. So I want to propose three things today. Developing virtue in the family, giving thanks, and asking for forgiveness and going to confession together. So first, developing virtue in the family. This happens by both communicating what virtue is in the house and then honoring the virtues that you're trying to uphold in the house. So the 7 Catholic virtues that we live by are the theological and the cardinal virtues. The cardinal virtues being justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude, and the theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. We want to discern as a family how these are acted out within our family, and some things that we probably need to strengthen within our family. So the teaching of these virtues helps the sharpening of our intellect And the honoring and building up of these virtues strengthens our will. When we have a conflict in the house, oftentimes mom and dad play the role of God, and they make a decision from on high whether this is the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do, whether kids can have this or that, whether we can have sugar or dessert or go to a party or whatnot. Parents tend to answer these questions without involving their kids in the conversation and bringing them into a life of virtue and a life of discernment that is appropriate to their age. When we create virtues in our family that we want to follow and we teach about those virtues, we can also discipline and make decisions based around those virtues as well. And the more we talk about it, the easier it is. So, for example, there's a conflict in the house, and one of the kids has not exercised the virtue of prudence or justice or love or hope. Instead of just saying, you're grounded, which you might still need to do, you can say, is this acting out the virtue of hope towards your brother when you hit him on his head? Is this acting out the virtue of temperance when you stole the chocolate and ate it all before bedtime? Does this exercise the virtue of justice by stealing your brother's toys and not letting him have it? We can ask these questions, and it involves them into the life of virtue, the life of discernment. And not only do mom and dad not look like dictators kind of just making up rules, God doesn't look like a dictator making up rules either. It involves them into the decision-making and discernment that I'm trying to be a heroically virtuous person. God gives us these rules because I desire to break them. And these rules, if followed correctly, and the desires to not break them, are instilled in me, that's the human person that God wants to see. So the first one, virtues. Build up the life of virtues. The last thing with the virtues is honor your kids by living out those virtues. This is typically done at birthdays or feast days or special holidays for each of the kids, but it can happen even daily if you see them living out this virtue of fortitude or faith or hope or love or justice. You can notice these things and then point them out and honor them in a special way. This might mean you honor them in front of the whole family. This might mean you give them a little treat, something that they like to do when you see them living out these virtues. This is a beautiful thing to do for birthdays, that every single person in the family can honor that person for a virtue that they've seen them growing in that year. So not only does this build up the individual in their own, strengthening of their will, but it also sharpens our intellect and sharpens our ability to look at each other differently within the household. Because I'm not just looking at someone in the house for all the stuff I can get out of them, but I'm looking at them like, oh man, their birthday's coming up. I'm going to have to honor them. I'm going to have to think of some things that I want to honor them for. And our kids, they quickly realize that this is a reality that's not going away in the house, and they start to live life a little differently. The second one is pretty simple, but it's not always done easily because it has to have a habit within it. So giving thanks as a family is something that I've done for a long time and seen in other families. And this is something that you want to do with very regular basis. This helps us to combat the second half of the commandments, the love of neighbor, because I'm not going to covet my neighbor's goods, and I'm not going to steal from someone else, and I'm not going to covet my neighbor's wife if I have an appropriate understanding of the things that God has given me and that my family has given me, and I'm appropriately thankful for all these wonderful things. If we've instilled the virtue of giving thanks often, we are much less likely to say, I don't have enough. I want what that person has. I want to go take it. I want to go take it with force maybe. So the beautiful way to do this is once a week when you have your family dinner. We do it at Lord's Day, so on a Saturday evening or a Sunday evening, whenever we have our nicer dinner together as a family, we just go around and every single person says something that they're thankful for. This is something you can do weekly. This is something you can do much more regularly. This is something you can do even every day. When I pick up my nephew from school, I ask him questions like this all the time. And, it's going to be awkward the first couple times you do it. But just get over it. The kids will get over it. You'll get over it. It won't be awkward anymore because it'll be the new norm. And when you have their kids have friends over and there's other family over, keep doing it. Wouldn't it be beautiful if other families saw that you were giving thanks every single week, and even a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 13-year-old can all find something during the week that they want to give thanks to God for? It's a beautiful thing. The last thing is asking for forgiveness and going to confession as a habitual thing in the family. This is such a beautiful thing, and it counteracts all the commandments as well. So this is a wonderful thing that we're more cognizant. Our intellects and our wills are sharpened and strengthened because we're actually thinking about these things. And we see that mom and dad are quick to ask for forgiveness and forgive each other. So when mom and dad, this is definitely one of those that mom and dad really have to take the lead in. And they have to take the lead in all of these, but this is one where it's, probably the scariest for other kids, and probably the thing that happens the least in other families, where families are quick to forgive and ask for forgiveness, and we go to confession together as a family. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing, but again, like all the other ones, it's going to be a little awkward when we first start to do it. But parents, I encourage you to take the lead. And I would, as kids do so well with habits and routine, I would say try to do this routinely. Go to confession together as a family once a month. Maybe it's the first Sunday or the second week or the third week or fourth week or whenever it is. But just do it and pick it, and kids will get used to it. And they'll be the ones reminding you quickly, Mom and Dad, it's the first Saturday. We need to go to confession together. And also be quick to ask for forgiveness in the house. I know this isn't easy, and this is such a work of the devil to try to keep us apart, to keep us out of union together. Is he doesn't want us to ask for forgiveness quickly. He wants us to hold grudges. He wants us to beat each other up and be resentful of each other. He doesn't want us to forgive and ask for forgiveness. He wants us to be separated further and further and further away. The beautiful yet horrific image of the Great Divorce. C.S. Lewis describes the people in hell, those people that moved further and further and further away from other people because they just can't stand to be around other people. This is a life of unforgiveness. This is a life of not asking for forgiveness. And this happens within our families, but it also happens in our relationship with God. When we stop going to confession, we stop asking for forgiveness. We just put God further and further and further away from us. So it's a beautiful habit to get into, and it's one of those things that actively combats, the evils of what we're talking about in these 10 Commandments. And when we create habits like all of these, building up virtue, giving thanks, and asking for forgiveness, we sooner rather than later realize that the life of our family is completely changed, and the life and relationships with one another is starting to completely change. And we can look at each other and love each other so much easier when we're living in this life. So those are the 3 things I encourage you to do, especially, start making it a habit today and really push hard this month to make this a regular thing that becomes a normal thing in the future. You don't even have to think about it once it's created as a good habit. So please know of our prayers. Please know that you can always contact us and get a hold of us. You're never being a burden by coming in or calling or emailing or any of those things. That's what we're here for. That's why I'm here. Please give me a call. Please send me an email. Please stop in. Ask anything you need. Okay? I'm here for you, and please know of our continual prayers. God bless.